The 3 weeks passed like a dream and a nightmare combined. Commander Bo-Ra trained her stealth wing pilots until they could fly through asteroid fields blindfolded. The stealth ships were humanity's secret advantage, using biological components that machine sensors couldn't recognize as technology, living tissue woven into metal, creating vessels that appeared on scanners as nothing more than space debris. "We get one shot at this," she told her pilots. "The moment they detect us, we're dead. So don't get detected." Across the assembly's territory, ships gathered. Every species contributed what they could. The Altrani brought their science vessels, modified with weapons they had to remember how to build. The Vexori contributed their mining ships, retrofitted with armor plating. Even the peaceful Karani sent their transport fleet, ready to evacuate civilians if the battle went wrong. On Earth, the remaining human fleets prepared to launch. The Swift Retribution was in dry dock being repaired. Taeyang supervised the work personally, refusing to let anyone else touch his ship. "She saved our lives," he told the repair crews. "I'm going to make sure she can do it again." Dr. Yunji worked with Dongmin, humanity's weapons specialist, to perfect the Thunder Protocol. It was a beautiful piece of code, elegant and deadly. It would spread through the Skrell network like a disease, making each ship believe its nearest neighbor was an enemy. "The Skrell think in absolutes," Yunji explained. "Friend or foe, 1 or 0. If we make them question that, their whole system breaks down." Dongmin nodded, making adjustments. "We're using their perfection against them. Humans are messy, chaotic, unpredictable. That's our strength." Young Kiro, Elder Vesh's aide, spent those 3 weeks learning everything he could about human military tactics. He watched recordings of ancient human battles, studied their strategies, tried to understand how a species could be so good at something so terrible. "You celebrate warriors," he said to Daewon one day, "but you also celebrate peace. How do you hold both?" Daewon considered the question. "We remember that warriors fight so others don't have to. The greatest warrior is the one who prevents war. But when war comes, you need people who know how to win it." The day of battle arrived too quickly and not quickly enough. The Skrell fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. 50,000 ships arranged in mathematical precision, their weapons already powering up. They had calculated the position of every defending vessel, planned their attack vectors, optimized their fire patterns. They had not calculated for hope. "All ships, this is Admiral Sang-woo. Today we face an enemy designed to be unbeatable. But they forgot one thing. We're not trying to beat them at their own game. We're going to change the game entirely. Phase 1 begins now. Bo-Ra, you're clear to launch." Commander Bo-Ra's stealth wing slipped away from the main fleet. 20 small ships barely visible, moving with painful slowness to avoid detection. They drifted toward the Skrell formation like leaves on a breeze. Inside her cockpit, Bo-Ra watched the enemy ships grow larger. Her heart was steady, her hands sure. She had trained for this. They all had. "Remember," she said to her wing, "no active scanning, no communications. We're ghosts." The stealth ships penetrated the Skrell formation, sliding between the massive warships. Bo-Ra identified her target. A command vessel 3 times the size of any other ship. She maneuvered closer, released her package of nuclear charges with magnetic clamps, and drifted away. Across the formation, her pilots did the same. 20 charges, 20 command ships. "Phase 1 complete," Bo-Ra transmitted on the tightest beam possible. "Charges are set." "Getting clear." "Acknowledged," Sang-woo replied. "All forces prepare for Phase 2. This is it." The combined fleet of humanity and the Galactic Assembly began their attack. 3,000 ships against 50,000. It should have been suicide. Ji-won flew the Swift Retribution at the head of the human formation. The ship was repaired, upgraded, and ready for war. Beside her, Taeyang monitored every system, making constant adjustments. "Here they come," Byung-ho said from tactical. The Skrell response was immediate and devastating. Energy beams lanced through space, cutting into the Allied fleet. Ships exploded, their shields overwhelmed in seconds. The Altrani science vessels never meant for combat took the worst of it, but they held formation. They had learned from humanity. Sometimes courage matters more than calculation. Daewon stood on his bridge, watching friends die. Every lost ship was a name he knew, a face he recognized. But he kept his expression steady. All ships maintain the attack pattern. Keep their attention on us. The battle became a chaos of light and destruction. The Allied fleet pushed forward, drawing the Skrell into concentrated positions. It was working, but the cost was terrible. On the assembly station, Elder Vesh watched the battle unfold. Kiro stood beside him, tears streaming down his young face as he saw ships from his world burning. So many dead, Kiro whispered. Yes, Vesh said quietly. This is what we had forgotten. This is what humanity never forgot. That sometimes to preserve life you must be willing to give your own. Phase 2 holding, Sang-Woo reported. Bo-Ra status. Almost clear of the formation, Admiral. 30 seconds. Those 30 seconds felt like hours. The Skrell pressed their advantage, their perfect calculations telling them victory was assured. They had lost some ships, but the math was on their side. They didn't know the math was about to change. Bo-Ra is clear. Detonate the charges now. 20 nuclear explosions bloomed across the Skrell formation. The command ships didn't just explode. They vaporized, taking hundreds of nearby vessels with them. Dongmin deployed the Thunder Protocol. The weapon specialist activated his creation. The virus launched from every human ship simultaneously, racing through space on quantum signals, finding the disrupted Skrell network and pouring into it like water into cracks. The Skrell fleet hesitated. Their coordination wavered. Ships began firing at each other. Their friend or foe systems corrupted, their perfect logic turned into chaos. It's working, Tae-Young shouted. The network is collapsing. But then the Skrell adapted. They began isolating infected ships, cutting them off from the network. The spread of the virus slowed, then stopped. The enemy fleet, though damaged, was still operational. Still deadly, still winning. Sang-Woo saw it happening. The plan was failing. They had hurt the enemy, but not enough. The Skrell would recover, adapt, and finish them all. He made his decision. All human vessels, this is Admiral Sang-Woo. It's been an honor serving with you. Remember why we fight. Remember who we protect. He turned to his crew. Evacuate the ship. That's an order. His first officer understood immediately. Sir, no. We can find another way. There is no other way. Get our people off this ship now. Daewon heard the order and knew what it meant. Admiral, wait. Captain Daewon, you've done enough. More than enough. Let an old man finish this. The evacuation pods launched from the flagship, carrying the crew to safety. Sang-Woo sat alone on the bridge, guiding his ship toward the center of the Skrell formation. He activated the faster-than-light drive, something no one should do in normal space. The math said it was impossible, that the ship would tear itself apart. But Sang-Woo had learned from his crew. Sometimes you need to do the impossible. The flagship accelerated, faster and faster, approaching light speed in normal space. The hull began to glow, reality itself bending around it. For Earth, Sang-Woo whispered. For all of us. The ship struck the Skrell nexus at faster-than-light speed. The explosion was like nothing anyone had ever seen. A shockwave of pure energy rippled outward, disrupting every quantum signal within 1,000 kilometers. The Skrell network didn't just collapse. It shattered. Without coordination, without communication, the Skrell ships became individual hunters instead of a unified force. And individual hunters could be defeated. All ships concentrate fire, Daewon ordered. Take them down one by one. The battle turned. The Allied fleet, battered and broken, found new strength. They fought like humanity had taught them, with courage, with sacrifice, with the understanding that some things were worth dying for. When it was over, the silence was deafening. The Skrell fleet was destroyed. But the cost had been terrible. Of the 3,000 Allied ships, fewer than 800 survived. Earth's third fleet was reduced to 47 vessels. The swift Retribution had lost an engine and most of its weapons, but it was still flying. Bo-Ra's stealth wing had lost 12 ships. But 8 made it home. Hyojin stood in the assembly chamber looking at the casualty reports. Thousands dead, tens of thousands. Species that had known peace for 3,000 years had learned war again, and they had learned it from humanity. Elder Vesh approached her, his ancient face showing exhaustion and something else. Respect. The Galactic Assembly hereby grants humanity full membership, effective immediately. Not as a reward, but as recognition of what you are. You came to us violent and chaotic. We rejected you for that. We were fools, he gestured to the stars beyond. You showed us that peace is not the absence of strength, but the choice to use strength wisely. You saved us by being what we had forgotten to be, willing to fight for what we believe in. Cairo stepped forward, his young face serious. Will you teach us? Not just how to fight, but how to be like you? How to be brave. The emergency session of the Galactic Assembly was unlike anything in its 3,000-year history. Elder Vesh stood at the center of the Great Hall, his usually calm face showing something the other council members rarely saw: fear. Around him, holographic displays showed the data recovered from the Skrell corvette. The numbers were clear and terrible. 50,000 ships, he said, his voice heavy. The main Skrell fleet contains 50,000 warships all heading toward inhabited space. They will reach the core systems in 3 weeks. The chamber erupted. Representatives from 7 species spoke at once, their voices blending into chaos. Some demanded immediate evacuation of frontier worlds. Others insisted on fortifying their home systems. A few simply sat in stunned silence. Dr. Yunji stood in the human delegation area, reviewing the data on her tablet. She was a xenoarchaeologist, someone who studied dead civilizations. Now she was looking at the reason so many civilizations were dead. The Skrell were designed as a weapon, she said to Hyojin, who stood beside her. Someone created them to wipe out biological life, then lost control. They've been dormant for 10,000 years, hiding in the galactic core. Our mining operations on Talvis 9 woke them up. Can they be stopped? Yunji looked at the numbers again. 50,000 ships, each one a perfect killing machine. I don't know. The species that built them are extinct. Maybe the Skrell destroyed them too. Vesh called for order, but the chamber remained in chaos. Finally, he activated a sound pulse that silenced everyone. We must combine our fleets. Together, we can mount a defense. The military coordinator, a being from a species that had forgotten how to fight, brought up more displays. Our combined forces number 3,000 ships. All are patrol craft and peacekeeping vessels. None were designed for war. The math was simple and brutal. 3,000 against 50,000. The Galactic Assembly would lose. We should surrender, someone said. Perhaps we can negotiate. They're machines, Hyojin spoke up from her position. They don't negotiate. They were built to eliminate biological life. That's all they do. Then we're doomed, another voice said. A new signal appeared on the displays. A fleet was approaching the assembly station. Ships bearing the symbol of Earth. Admiral Sangwoo's face appeared on the main screen. He was an older man, gray-haired and stern, with eyes that had seen things the assembly members couldn't imagine. Behind him, the bridge of Earth's flagship was alive with activity. Galactic Assembly, this is Admiral Sangwoo of Earth's 3rd Fleet. We received Captain Daewon's report. We're here to help. Vesh studied the readings. Admiral? Your fleet numbers only 200 ships. While we appreciate the gesture, I'm not sure what difference. With respect, Elder, we're not here to make gestures. We're here to win. Earth is sending its entire military. 10 more fleets are being mobilized. But more importantly, we're built for war. Our ships may be small, but we designed them to fight and survive. The assembly coordinator pulled up Earth's ship specifications. What he saw surprised him. Human vessels were heavily armored with redundant systems and weapons designed for one purpose: combat. They weren't elegant like assembly ships. They were brutal and efficient. Your species hasn't fought a war in 2 centuries, Vesh said. Sangwoo's expression didn't change. We haven't forgotten how. We just chose not to. There's a difference. Daewon and his crew arrived at the assembly station an hour later. The swift retribution looked like it had been through a grinder. Scorch marks covered the hull. One of the engine pods was barely functioning, but it was still flying. They were escorted to the council chamber where the debate was still raging. When Daewon entered, the room fell silent. Here was the human who had stood against the Skrell and survived. Here was someone who had actually fought them and won, even if just barely. Vesh approached him. The elder was taller than any human, graceful and ancient. But now he looked small, diminished by fear and uncertainty. Captain Daewon, why did you help us at Talvis 9? We had just rejected your people again. You had no obligation to risk your lives. Daewon met his gaze steadily. Because it was the right thing to do. We don't help you to earn membership. We help because life is precious. We help because we believe that standing together is the only way any of us survive. You can reject us again after this if you want. It won't change what we do. Vesh was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something unprecedented. He bowed, a gesture of deep respect in Altrani culture. We were wrong about your species. We saw your history of conflict and assumed you were violent. We didn't understand that your capacity for violence was always paired with something greater. Your willingness to sacrifice for others. He straightened and turned to the assembly. I propose we grant humanity emergency military command of all assembly forces. They have experience we lack. They have perspective we need. The vote was swift. For the first time in history, the Galactic Assembly placed its fate in the hands of a species that wasn't even a member. Admiral Sang-Woo materialized in the chamber via hologram. He studied the tactical displays, absorbing information quickly. Quan, his navigation officer, fed him data from Earth's strategic computers. We can't win a straight fight, Sang-Woo said. 3,000 ships even with Earth's forces aren't enough. So we don't fight straight. We fight smart. He pulled up a star map and began marking positions. The Skrell are using quantum entanglement for communication. That's fast, but it's also a weakness. If we can disrupt their network, they'll lose coordination. Tai Yang stepped forward. Sir, I created a virus that worked on one ship, but deploying it across 50,000 ships would require direct access to their command network. Then we get access. Sang-Woo's fingers moved across the display, outlining a plan. We have 3 weeks before they reach core systems. We use that time to prepare. Operation Lightning Strike. 3 phases. He explained the plan, and as he did, the assembly members realized they were witnessing something they had never seen before. Humanity at war. It wasn't about honor or glory. It wasn't about following ancient protocols. It was about winning no matter the cost. Phase 1. Commander Bo-Ra leads our stealth ships into the Skrell formation. They'll plant charges on the command vessels. A hologram of Bo-Ra appeared. She was young, fierce, and absolutely confident. Phase 2. All Allied forces engage in a frontal assault. It's a diversion. They'll take heavy casualties. The assembly members gasped. Sang-Woo acknowledged them with a nod. I know, but some must die so others can live. That's war. Phase 3. When the charges detonate, we deploy the Thunder Protocol. It's Tai Yang's virus, weaponized and spread through the quantum network. The Skrell ships will turn on each other. The plan was insane. It required perfect timing, incredible bravery, and luck. It assumed the enemy wouldn't adapt. Every military expert from every species said it couldn't work, but no one had a better idea. Besh looked at the humans. These strange beings who had arrived among the stars with weapons and war plans, but also with compassion and sacrifice. When this is over, he said quietly to Hyojin, we will formally accept humanity into the assembly. Not because you saved us, but because you showed us what we had forgotten, that peace is not the absence of the capacity for violence. Peace is choosing not to use that capacity except when absolutely necessary. Hyojin smiled sadly. Let's make sure there's an assembly left to accept us into. The countdown began. 3 weeks until the Skrell arrived. 3 weeks to prepare for the greatest battle the galaxy had ever seen, and humanity would lead them into it. The impact was controlled chaos. Ji-Wan cut the engines at the last possible second, letting momentum carry them into the Skrell corvette's side. Metal screamed against metal. The swift retribution's reinforced bow crumpled, but it held. More importantly, it punched through the enemy's hull. Marines, go! Daewon shouted. Young Sik and his team of 12 were already moving. They wore combat suits, bulky things that humans had designed 2 centuries ago but never needed to use. Until now. Magnetic clamps activated on their boots as they rushed through the breach, crossing from one ship to another in the vacuum of space. The Skrell defense systems activated immediately. Automated turrets emerged from the walls, tracking the intruders. Young Sik's training took over. He moved fast, using his rifle to destroy the first turret before it could fire. His team spread out, each Marine covering the others. These things are old but still deadly, Young Sik said over the comm. Stay sharp. The inside of the Skrell ship was nothing like human vessels. No corridors, no rooms, just open spaces filled with machinery and flowing with some kind of liquid that pulsed with light. The Marines pushed forward, following the path Tai Yang had mapped from the swift retribution. Back on the human ship, Tai Yang worked frantically at his station. He had connected a drone to the Skrell ship's systems, trying to find a weakness. The machines were incredibly advanced, but they were also incredibly old, and old things, even well-built ones, had vulnerabilities. Captain, I think I found something, Tai Yang said, his voice excited. They're using quantum entanglement for communication. All their ships are linked instantly across space. Can you disrupt it? Maybe, but it's a two-way connection. If I can get a direct link to their network, I might be able to send them something they won't like. Daewon understood. A virus? Not exactly. These machines are too smart for a normal virus. But what if we give them something that breaks their logic? Something so chaotic they can't process it? On the colony, Ambassador Hyojin had taken charge of the evacuation. The Altrani coordinator had frozen in panic, unable to make decisions in a crisis his people hadn't faced in millennia. So Hyojin simply started giving orders and people followed. Get the children on the first ships, medical personnel on the second. She directed traffic with quick gestures, keeping everyone moving. Don't stop, don't look back, just move. A Vexori worker stumbled, dropping the supplies he was carrying. Hyojin helped him up. Leave it! Your life is worth more than cargo. But the medical supplies won't matter if you're dead. Go. She could see the Skrell ships through the dome, dark shapes against the stars. The swift retribution was locked against one of them. A David fighting Goliath. It was impossible. It was suicide. It was the most human thing she had ever seen. Down in the mines, Jae-hwan heard the evacuation orders. He was a simple man, a miner who had spent 20 years breaking rocks and extracting precious elements. He knew explosives. He knew how to place charges to bring down exactly what you wanted and nothing more. He looked at the mining charges scattered around the lower levels. Then he looked at the maps showing the Skrell approach vectors. An idea formed, dangerous and probably stupid. But he had seen what those machines did to the patrol craft. Doing nothing was certain death. Doing something stupid at least gave them a chance. Jae-hwan started placing charges, working faster than he ever had in his life. Young-sik's team reached the core of the Skrell corvette. It was a sphere of pure energy, crackling with power. This was what ran the ship, what gave it life. Destroy it and the vessel would die. But Young-sik had different orders. Taeyang were at the core. Now what? Don't destroy it. I need you to plug this connector into the nearest interface port. I'm sending you the exact location. Young-sik saw it, a small panel near the core. He pulled out the device Taeyang had given him. It looked like a simple cable with a modified plug. He approached the interface, feeling the heat from the energy sphere wash over him. A turret dropped from the ceiling. Young-sik's teammate Subin shot it before it could fire. Move, Commander. Young-sik jammed the connector into the port. It's in. On the swift retribution, Taeyang's screens lit up with data. He was in. He could see the entire Skrell network. Thousands of ships all linked together, sharing information at impossible speeds. They calculated, they planned, they optimized every action with perfect mathematical precision. That's your weakness, Taeyang whispered. You're too perfect. He began typing, creating code that wasn't meant to destroy but to confuse. Recursive loops that led nowhere. Calculations that had no solution. Questions with no answers. He was feeding chaos into a system built on absolute logic. The Skrell ships hesitated. For the first time in the battle, their movements became uncertain. They had calculated every possible action the defenders might take. They had not calculated that someone would make them question their own calculations. It's working, Byung-ho shouted from his station. Their formation is breaking up. Daewon saw the opportunity. All evacuation ships, launch now. Ji-won, get us clear of this corvette. The swift retribution pulled away from the Skrell vessel, metal tearing as the two ships separated. Alarms blared. Hull breaches were reported on 3 decks, but the ship was still flying. The evacuation ships launched from Talvis 9, 20 vessels filled with civilians fleeing for their lives. The Skrell machines tried to target them, but their aim was off. The virus Taeyang had unleashed was spreading through their network, making them doubt, making them recalculate, making them human in the worst possible way. Then Jae-hwan triggered his charges. The explosions ripped through the lower levels of the colony, but they were precisely placed. Rock and metal erupted outward in a massive debris cloud, right into the path of the advancing Skrell ships. It wasn't enough to destroy them, but it blinded their sensors, gave the evacuation ships precious seconds to escape. Hyojin watched the last civilian ship launch, then ran for her own escape pod. The colony was lost, but the people were saved. She allowed herself a moment of relief as she sealed the pod and launched. From space, Talvis 9 looked like a dying star, explosions blooming across its surface as the Skrell machines tore it apart. But the evacuation ships were clear, jumping to faster-than-light speed, carrying thousands to safety. Young-sik and his Marines made it back to the swift retribution, just as the Skrell corvette's core went critical. Taeyang's virus had done more than confuse it. It had made the ship turn its weapons on itself. All personnel accounted for, Captain, Young-sik reported, breathing hard. Daewon nodded. Ji-won, get us out of here. Where to, sir? Anywhere but here. We need to regroup and warn the assembly. This isn't over. As the swift retribution jumped away, Daewon looked at his crew. They were battered, exhausted, and scared. But they had done the impossible. They had stood against an enemy that should have destroyed them, and they had given thousands of people a chance to live. That was victory enough, for now. But in the depths of space, the main Skrull fleet was still coming, and it was much, much larger than anyone knew. The attack came without warning. Nari was at her station when every screen in the communications center exploded with alerts. Her coffee cup fell from her hand, shattering on the floor as she stared at the readings. Ships. Dozens of them. No, hundreds. Emerging from the asteroid belt and heading straight for Talvis 9. This is not a drill, she shouted into the colony-wide channel. Unknown hostile vessels approaching. All personnel to emergency shelters. The colony's defense coordinator, an Altrani officer who had never seen combat, stared at his own screens in confusion. This must be an error. Run a diagnostic. There's no error. Nari's fingers flew across her console, trying to get more information. They're real. They're armed, and they'll be in weapons range in 4 minutes. The first energy beam struck the colony's outer shields. The whole station shook. Lights flickered. Alarms began wailing throughout the habitat domes. Elder Vesh received the emergency signal in his chambers. He had been reviewing poetry, an Altrani tradition before sleep. The message made no sense to him at first. Attack on Talvis 9? Impossible. There had been no wars in 3,000 years. He activated his communication link to the colony. This must be some mistake. Identify the vessels and establish communication. We've tried, Elder, came the panicked reply. They're not responding. They're just shooting! Another blast hit the shields. This one was stronger. The shield readings dropped by 30%. At this rate, they would fail in minutes. The Altrani Defense Force scrambled their ships, 12 light patrol craft designed for showing presence, not fighting. They moved into position with careful precision, following protocols written centuries ago for scenarios that had never happened. The Skrull machines cut through them like they were made of paper. On the swift retribution, Daewon was in his quarters when the emergency signal came through. He was on his feet and running before the alert finished playing. Ji-won, get us moving now, he shouted as he reached the bridge. Already on it, Captain. Her hands were steady on the controls, but her voice was tight. I'm plotting a jump to Talvis 9. How long? 20 minutes if we want to arrive in one piece. 12 if we don't care about safety margins. Make it 10. Taeyang's voice crackled over the intercom from engineering. Captain, if we push the engines that hard, we might lose the stabilizers. Then you'll fix them when we get there. People are dying, move! The swift retribution lurched forward, its engines burning brighter than they were designed to. The ship shuddered as it accelerated, building up to faster than light speed, faster than any safety manual would allow. On Talvis 9, chaos had taken over. Ambassador Hyojin ran through the corridors, helping evacuate civilians to the emergency shelters. An Altrani mother clutched her child, frozen in fear. Hyojin grabbed her arm and pulled her forward. Move! The shelters are this way. But my husband is in the mines. The mines are being evacuated too. You need to get your child to safety now. An explosion rocked the corridor. Part of the ceiling collapsed behind them. Hyojin pushed the mother forward, feeling debris strike her back. They made it to the shelter entrance just as another blast hit. The colony's shields were failing. The beautiful transparent domes that had let colonists see the stars were now their greatest weakness. When the shields fell, those domes would shatter. The Skrull machines pressed their attack with cold efficiency. They had calculated every variable, anticipated every defense. The Altrani ships tried to fight back, but their weapons barely scratched the ancient armor. One by one, the patrol craft were destroyed. The defense coordinator sent a desperate message to the Galactic Assembly. We need military support. We're being slaughtered. The Assembly's response came quickly. Hold position. We're sending our security fleet. Estimated arrival time 6 hours. 6 hours. The colony would be dead in 6 minutes. Then something unexpected happened. The swift retribution dropped out of faster-than-light speed right in the middle of the battle. It wasn't a clean exit. The ship tumbled, sparks flying from its hull. But G1 corrected their spin with a series of maneuvers that would have been impossible for any other pilot. Day-1 took in the situation at a glance. 12 patrol craft destroyed, colony shields at 15%, civilian evacuation ships trying to launch but being targeted by the enemy. And the enemy. Hundreds of machine ships unlike anything in the database. Byung-ho, I need options. His tactical officer looked up, face grim. Sir, we're one ship against hundreds. We have no options. Wrong answer. We always have options. We just need to think of one they won't expect. G1 understood immediately. She had flown with Day-1 long enough to know how he thought. The debris field from the destroyed patrol craft. If I thread through it at full speed, their targeting systems might lose us in the clutter. They'll calculate the probability of you making it through, Byung-ho said. It's mathematically impossible. G1 grinned, a wild expression that didn't match the deadly situation. Good thing I'm bad at math. The swift retribution dove toward the debris field. Energy beams tracked them, but G1 flew like the ship was an extension of her body. She rolled, twisted, dropped, and climbed through spinning wreckage at speeds that made the hull groan. Day-1 gripped his armrests. Tae-yang, I need all power to the forward shields. That'll leave our weapons at 40% capacity, sir. Do it. We're not going to win this with firepower anyway. The plan was insane, but Day-1 had learned long ago that sometimes insane was the only option left. They couldn't save everyone. The colony was doomed unless the assembly fleet arrived, and 6 hours might as well be 6 years. But they could buy time. They could save some people, and they could make these machines pay for every life they took. All power to engines and shields, Day-1 ordered. G1, get us close to that big one. He pointed at the largest Skrell ship, clearly the command vessel. Captain, that ship has enough firepower to vaporize us, Byung-ho said. Then we better be fast. Hurry, send a message to the colony. Tell them to get everyone on those evacuation ships now. We're going to give them an opening. The swift retribution burst from the debris field, heading straight for the Skrell command ship. Every weapon on the enemy vessel turned toward them. Energy beams lanced out, brilliant and deadly. But G1 was already moving, the ship dancing through the attack like a leaf in a storm. They closed the distance in seconds. Sir, what's the plan? Tae-yang asked. Day-1's jaw was set, his eyes hard. We're going to do something really stupid. We're going to ram them. The bridge went silent for a heartbeat. Then Byung-ho started laughing, a sound edged with hysteria. They'll never see that coming. Their calculations won't even consider it as a possibility. Exactly. Prepare for collision, and somebody tell our Marines to get ready. We're going boarding. The swift retribution accelerated, and the Skrell machines, for the first time in 10,000 years, encountered something their logic couldn't predict. Humanity had arrived. The Great Hall of the Galactic Assembly stood silent as Ambassador Hyo-jin finished her speech. She had practiced these words for months, hoping they would finally convince the elder species to accept humanity among them. Her hands trembled slightly as she stepped back from the podium, waiting for their response. The 7 council members sat on their elevated platforms, their tall frames draped in ceremonial robes that shimmered with light. They barely looked at her. The head counselor, an Altrani named Vesh, touched a floating screen before him. His long fingers moved with the grace of someone who had never known manual labor or hardship. Request denied, Vesh said, his voice carrying no emotion. Humanity remains too young for membership in the Galactic Assembly. Perhaps in another century you will be ready. Hyo-jin felt her heart sink. This was the 47th time humanity had asked. The 47th rejection. She bowed respectfully, knowing that anger would serve no purpose here. These beings had maintained peace for 3,000 years. They believed their way was the only way. As she left the hall, her communication device buzzed. It was a message from Captain Day-1, commander of the human ship Swift Retribution. How did it go? He asked. Same as always, she replied, walking through the crystal corridors of the station. They think we're too aggressive, too unpredictable. We've been peaceful for 2 centuries, Day-1 said, frustration clear in his voice. I know. But to them, 2 centuries is nothing. They measure time in millennia. Hyo-jin reached her quarters on Talvis 9, the mining colony where she served as humanity's representative. The colony was a joint operation between several species, extracting rare elements from the asteroid field. Humans worked alongside Altrani, Vexori, and others, proving every day that they could cooperate peacefully. She looked out her window at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there was Earth, the small blue world that had sent her here with hope. She wouldn't give up. Humanity had earned its place among the stars through hard work and determination. Someday the Assembly would see that. On the bridge of the swift retribution, Captain Day-Wan ended the call and leaned back in his chair. His ship floated in space near a supply station, loading cargo for its next run to Talvis 9. The vessel wasn't impressive by galactic standards. It had been a cargo hauler once, modified with better engines and some basic weapons, but it was fast and speed mattered in the vast emptiness of space. "Captain, we're almost loaded," said Ji-Wan, his pilot and second in command. She was reviewing flight plans on her screen, her fingers dancing across the controls. "Should be ready to depart in 2 hours." "Good, let's make this a quick run. I want to check on the ambassador." In the engine room, Tae-Yang was working on the ship's faster-than-light drive. The young engineer had a gift for keeping old machines running. He hummed while he worked, tightening connections and replacing worn parts. The swift retribution wasn't pretty, but Tae-Yang treated it like it was the finest ship in the fleet. Far beyond the colony, in the deep darkness between stars, something ancient was waking. In the asteroid belt that ringed the Talvis system, old machines were coming to life. They had slept for 10,000 years waiting. The vibrations from the mining operations had reached them, triggering protocols older than any living civilization. The Skrell had been built long ago by a species now extinct. Their creators had made them for one purpose: to eliminate biological life wherever they found it. They were patient. They were thorough, and they had just detected thousands of living beings on Talvis 9. The first probe activated, its sensors sweeping the system. It found the colony, the ships, the mining operations. It calculated optimal attack vectors. It began waking others. On Talvis 9, life continued as normal. Workers finished their shifts in the mines. Families gathered for meals in the habitat domes. Children played in the gardens that grew food for the colony. Nobody knew that death was stirring in the darkness beyond. Ambassador Hyo-Jin sat in her office writing her report for Earth's government. She described the rejection, the Council's words, the frustration of trying to convince beings who saw humans as children playing at civilization. But she also wrote about the friendships she had made here, the Altrani workers who respected human efficiency, the Vexori scientists who admired human curiosity. "We're making progress in small ways," she wrote. "The people here see us as equals even if their leaders don't. That's where real change begins." A soft chime interrupted her. It was Nari, the communications officer assigned to the colony. The young woman's face appeared on Hyojin's screen, looking concerned. "Ambassador, I'm picking up something strange from the asteroid belt. It might be nothing, but the sensors are showing energy signatures that don't match our mining equipment. Have you reported it to colony security?" "Yes, ma'am. They said it's probably just interference from the mining operations. But I've never seen readings like this before." Hyojin frowned. "Keep monitoring it. If it changes, let me know immediately." "Yes, ma'am." The screen went dark and Hyojin returned to her report. But something nagged at her mind. Humans had learned to trust their instincts, that feeling when something wasn't quite right. The elder species had lived in peace so long they had forgotten to be cautious. In the asteroid belt, more probes were waking. They connected to each other through quantum signals, sharing data instantly across vast distances. They analyzed the colony's defenses and found them weak. The species here had no real weapons, no military preparations. They would be easy to eliminate. The Skrell began to move, drifting silently toward Talvis 9. Their weapons charged, ancient but still deadly. They had destroyed civilizations before. They would do so again. On the swift retribution, Day-Wan reviewed his crew roster. They were good people, every one of them. Ji-Wan could fly through a debris field blindfolded. Tae-Yang could fix anything with spare parts and determination. Byung-Ho, his tactical officer, had studied every battle in human history. Nari could hear signals in the noise that others missed. They weren't warriors. None of them were. Humanity had put war behind them 2 centuries ago. But Day-Wan knew that peace was only possible when good people stood ready to defend it. He didn't know that soon. Very soon that readiness would be tested. The stars shone cold and bright, and in their light an ancient evil was coming home.